Tyler's hatchback bottomed out twice on the last quarter-mile switchback, and when he finally killed the engine in the clearing, he turned to me and pointed through the windshield. 5 other cars were parked under the firs in a loose half-circle around an old fire ring. He grinned at me the way he had been grinning since college and said, "Surprise!" I sat in the passenger seat, a second longer than I needed to. The grin on Tyler's face was the same grin he had given me at the gas station in town when he made me wait while he ran inside for what he said was just coffee. The same grin he had given me on Highway 26 when he said we needed to take a different route because of construction on the one I knew. The same grin he had given me when we turned off the highway and started climbing Forest Road 26. "You son of a bitch," I said. He laughed. "Get out of the car." I got out. The afternoon was the kind of dry warm that the Cascades give you in late June, the air thin enough that your sinuses know you have come up in elevation. The meadow opened in front of me, a long oval of grass and wildflowers ringed by Douglas fir on 3 sides. On the 4th side, the ground dropped away into a valley I could not see the bottom of from where I was standing. The sky was so clear it looked solid. Mike came out from behind one of the tents first. He had grown a full beard since the last time I had seen him, and he was wearing the same red flannel he had been wearing every time I had ever seen him outside, in any weather above 40 degrees. He pulled me into a hug and slapped me on the back hard enough to make me cough. "Look at this guy," he said. "Look at this guy." Jonah was behind him with 2 of the camp chairs already set up. He was wearing his glasses on a strap and the same cargo shorts he had worn in high school. Jonah was the kind of person who would have brought a first aid kit. I knew without asking that there was a first aid kit somewhere within 10 feet of his car. There were probably 2. He hugged me with one arm and asked if I had eaten. Riley was at the fire ring, half kneeling over a pile of kindling, trying to coax the flame with a long stick and a Bic lighter. He looked up and gave me a wave with the lighter still going. Riley was the youngest of us by 2 years, and he had the kind of nervous energy that translated into laughing too loud at jokes that were not that funny. He had been laughing too loud at jokes since I had met him at 14. He had a beer open already and a second one in the dirt beside his foot. Marcus was off to the side under one of the firs with his Nikon up to his face. He was photographing the light through the needles. When he heard my name, he turned and lowered the camera and gave me the small smile he gave instead of speaking, which was Marcus's whole repertoire. He had been quiet since middle school, and he had not changed. Nate came out of the tent he had been pitching, brushing pine needles off his jeans. He was wearing a Trailblazers cap pulled down low and a t-shirt that said "Go Ask Your Mother" on it in big block letters. He grinned at me the same way Tyler had grinned. "You drove him all the way out here, and he didn't figure it out?" he said. "He had questions," Tyler said. "I told him to mind his business." I stood in the middle of the meadow with my duffel still over my shoulder and looked at the 6 of them, and for a second I had to remind myself how to breathe. We had not all been in the same place since the graduation party at Mike's parents' house in May. Before that, the last time the 7 of us had been in the same room had been homecoming our senior year of high school. 4 years ago. Before that, a long time before that. Tyler put a hand on my shoulder and squeezed it. "You okay?" "I'm gonna kill you," I said. "Yeah. Later. After dinner." Mike clapped his hands. "Tent goes up before you drink, kid. House rules." "Whose rules?" Riley said. "My rules," Mike said. "I'm the oldest. I'm the responsible adult. We are going to do this responsibly." Jonah was already walking over with one of the spare tents from his car. He set it down at my feet. "You want help, or do you want to do it yourself?" "I'll do it," I said. "He'll do it wrong," Tyler said. "Then he'll do it wrong, and we'll fix it later," Jonah said. He always said something like that. Jonah was the kind of person who would let you fail until the failure was about to cost you something he cared about, and then he would step in. He had let me almost flunk out of community college freshman year before he showed up at my apartment with 3 textbooks and a pot of coffee, and made me sit at the kitchen table until I had outlined a semester's worth of papers I had not yet written. I set up my tent at the edge of the meadow, where the grass thinned out and the duff of the forest floor started, closer to the tree line than the others. I do not know why I did that. The other tents were closer to the fire and closer to the cars and closer to each other. Mine was 20 feet off, with the dark of the firs at my back. I told myself I wanted privacy. I told myself I was being courteous, leaving the warm spots for the others. The truth is, I do not know why I put my tent at the edge. When I had it staked, I dropped my duffel inside and crawled back out, and Tyler was holding out an old style. I took it. He clinked the side of his can against mine. "Welcome to your real graduation party," he said. We sat in the camp chairs around the fire that Riley had finally managed to start, and Mike walked over from his truck with a cooler that he set on the ground between us, and that was how the afternoon began. The fire was small but steady. The shadows were not long yet. The valley below us was full of the long, slanted light that you only get in the mountains in early summer, when the sun is still high enough that the bottom of the canyon does not go dark until almost 10 at night. Tyler had been planning the trip for a month. I learned this in pieces over the next 2 hours. He had called Mike first because Mike was the hardest to pin down, married already at 24 and working long hours at a body shop in Bend. Mike had said yes immediately, which surprised Tyler enough that he had to sit down for a minute. Tyler had called Jonah next. Jonah had agreed before Tyler finished the sentence. Riley had said yes the day Tyler called him, and then had texted Tyler again the next morning to confirm the date and a third time that afternoon. Marcus had taken 3 days to respond and had agreed in a text message that consisted of the word yes and a thumbs up emoji. Nate had said no twice and yes on the third ask, which was Nate. I was the last one Tyler called. He had not told me anything except that he wanted us to go camping the weekend before he left. He had not said the rest of them were coming because he had been afraid I would say no. He told me this with a kind of careful seriousness that I did not know what to do with, so I told him to shut up and gave him my middle finger and drank my beer. The truth is, he was right. I would have said no. I had not been doing well. I had been doing the version of not well that you do at 22 when you have a degree you do not know what to do with, and a part-time job at a Safeway, and a mother who keeps asking when you are going to come over for dinner. I had been sleeping until 10 and staying up until 3 and not answering my phone. I had been telling people I was figuring things out. I was not figuring things out. I was waiting, and I did not know what for. Tyler leaving the following Saturday for a job in Boise was the last thing left on the calendar, and after that the calendar was empty, and the empty was what I had been avoiding. Mike had brought hot dogs and the makings for bean chili, and 4 pounds of ground beef, and a bag of potatoes, and a flat of eggs. Jonah had brought a percolator and 3 pounds of coffee. Riley had brought beer. So had Nate. So had Mike. So had Tyler. Marcus had brought a bag of fancy bread from a bakery in Eugene and a wedge of cheese and a jar of fig jam, and was clearly going to eat the bag of bread by himself if no one else wanted any. Marcus liked the things he liked. We ate hot dogs first. Mike cooked them on a long fork over the fire, and we ate them standing up off paper plates with mustard from a plastic bear-shaped bottle that Jonah had brought. And Riley got mustard down his shirt within 30 seconds, and we all laughed at him. And he laughed too. Then Riley asked Tyler about Boise. Tyler said it was fine. Tyler said the apartment was small, but the rent was less than he had been paying in Salem. And there was a brewery he wanted to take me to when I came out to visit. Riley asked what he was doing for work. Tyler said he was going to be a project manager at a company that sold software to dentists. Mike laughed. Tyler laughed too. He said the company paid better than anything else he had been able to find. Riley said he wished he had gone to college. Mike said college was a scam. Jonah said college was not a scam, but it was definitely overpriced. Nate said he had been to college and he had paid for it himself and he wanted his money back. Marcus did not say anything. Marcus had not gone to college. He had been working at a print shop in Eugene since high school and was apparently happy enough about it that none of us asked. I walked away from the fire while they were still talking. I do not know why I did that either, except that the conversation was about everyone's plans, and I had no plans, and the cliff edge was right there, and the sun was getting low, and I needed a minute. I told them I was going to look at the view. Riley said something about not falling off. Mike said something about my career as a stuntman. I waved them off without turning around. The edge of the meadow ran along the cliff for maybe 100 yards. The cliff was not sheer. It dropped at an angle for the first 30 feet or so, and then went vertical for a long way after that. The bottom of the valley was a dense green that I could not see through. Salt Creek was supposed to be down there somewhere, but I could not see it. The opposite ridge was maybe half a mile across the valley, a long bone of rock with firs growing out of it at angles that did not look possible. The sun was hitting the top of it and turning everything gold. I stood at the edge with my beer in one hand and looked across at the opposite ridge and tried to think about nothing. That was when I saw the shape. It was on the opposite ridge, near the top. It was low to the ground. It was moving along the ridgeline in a way that I could not place at first, which is the thing that I remember most clearly about it. I have spent years trying to explain how it moved, and I still cannot explain it. It was not the amble of a bear. It was not the pause and run of a deer. It was not the lope of a coyote or a wolf, and it was too big for a coyote anyway. It moved in long, flowing motions that ate the ground without seeming to lift off it. The motion was wrong for an animal. That was the only way I could explain it then, and it is the only way I can explain it now. The motion was wrong for an animal. I squinted. The shape stopped moving. I felt the back of my neck go cold. I had the very clear feeling, the way you sometimes feel when you are in a room and somebody is looking at you from behind, that the shape was looking back at me. There was no reason to think that. It was half a mile away. I could not see its face. I could not see its eyes. There was no face. There was just a shape on a ridge. But I stood there at the edge of the meadow with my beer in my hand and the cold spreading down my neck and into my shoulders, and I knew with a certainty that I had not earned that the shape was looking at me. Hey, I jumped. Nate had walked up behind me. He had another beer in each hand. He held one out to me. Sorry. Didn't mean to scare you. Wow. You look like I just shot you. You walked up quiet, I said. I always walk quiet. You okay? Yeah. I took the beer. I pointed across the valley. Look at that. Look at the top of the ridge. Nate looked. He looked for a long time. He took a sip of his beer. He looked some more. What am I looking at? He said. There's something up there. There's a shape. Dark thing. Moving along the top. He looked again. He scanned. He shielded his eyes with the hand that held the beer. I don't see anything, he said. I looked. The ridgeline was empty. I stood there for what felt like a long time. The sun was hitting the rock in long gold bars. There was nothing on the ridge. The dark shape was gone. I could not even point to the place where I had seen it. The whole top of the ridge looked the same to me now, a row of firs and a long bone of stone and nothing else. Probably an animal, Nate said. Bear, maybe. They get up here. They like the elevation in the summer. Got cooler air. Yeah, I said. You sure you're okay? Yeah. I just thought I saw something. He clapped me on the shoulder. Come on back to the fire. Mike's gonna burn the chili. I followed him back. I drank the second beer in about 4 minutes, and then I drank a third one, and I made myself sit close to the fire and laugh at what Riley was saying about a girl he had taken on a date the previous Friday. I did not look back at the ridge. I told myself there was nothing on the ridge. I told myself a lot of things that afternoon. The chili was good. Mike had been making it since high school. The recipe was his grandmother's. There was a bay leaf in it and some kind of dark beer and a small amount of cinnamon, which he refused to confirm, but which I could always taste. We ate in our chairs with the bowls in our laps. The sun finally dropped behind the ridge, across the valley, and the meadow went into shadow. The fire turned brighter against the dimming light. Jonah produced a portable speaker from somewhere in the back of his Civic and put on the kind of music we had all listened to in high school, Sublime and Third Eye Blind and Counting Crows. All the songs that I had not heard in years, and that immediately put me back in the parking lot of the Albertsons in our hometown, drinking warm soda out of plastic bottles at 16 years old. Riley sang along badly to Mr. Jones. We did not stop him. When it was full dark, Mike pulled out a bottle of Wild Turkey and a stack of plastic cups. We drank slowly. We talked about people we had gone to school with. We talked about Mr. Halloran, the calculus teacher who had been arrested 2 years out of high school for a thing none of us were entirely sure of. We talked about prom and the night Jonah's car had broken down on Highway 26 on the way back. And the four of us who had been in his car had ended up walking 3 miles in the cold to a gas station that had been closed, and had eaten a vending machine dinner of stale chips and warm Pepsi, and laughed until our stomachs hurt. We did not talk about Tyler leaving on Saturday. Nobody brought it up. The avoidance was its own kind of acknowledgement. I drank a 4th beer. I did not drink any of the bourbon. I told him I was driving home Sunday and I wanted to be sober enough to get down the mountain, which was true but was also not the only reason. I wanted to keep my head clear. I did not know why. I told myself it was just a precaution. Around midnight, Mike said he was going to bed. He stood up and stretched and groaned in a way that made Riley laugh, and then he walked over to his tent and zipped himself inside. Jonah went next, then Marcus, then Riley, who staggered as he walked. Nate followed Riley to make sure he made it to his tent without falling into the fire. Then Nate went to his own tent. Tyler and I sat by the fire for another 20 minutes, not talking much. He was leaving Saturday, and we both knew it, and neither of us wanted to make the night about that. "Hey," he said finally. "Yeah, you're gonna be all right." I looked at him. He was looking at the fire. "I know," I said. "I mean it. You're gonna figure it out. You always do." "Yeah." He stood up and stretched. He patted my shoulder on the way past my chair. "Don't stay up too late." "I won't." I sat at the fire alone for another 10 minutes. The music had been turned off when Jonah went to bed. The meadow was quiet. The fire was burning low. The stars over the cliff edge were the kind of stars you only see at elevation, sharp and many, the Milky Way visible as a long pale smear across the middle of the sky. The temperature had dropped enough that I could see my breath. Somewhere far down in the valley something called out. I could not tell what it was. An owl, maybe, or a coyote, or something else. I poured a little water from my bottle onto the fire to bring it down, and I went to my tent. I read for a while on my phone. I had downloaded a book before we left because there was no signal at the campsite, and I had known there would not be. The phone said 2:13 a.m. when my eyes started to get heavy. I plugged it in to the small battery brick I had brought, and I turned over in my sleeping bag and I closed my eyes. I do not know what time it was when I woke up. I had not looked at my phone. I would not look at it until later, and when I did it said 2:47 a.m. But I woke up. I woke up fast, the way you wake up when something specific has done it. Not a slow drift up, not a stretch and a sigh. I woke up the way you wake up when somebody has just touched your face in the dark. There was a sound outside my tent. I lay very still. I had my eyes closed. I had the strange feeling that if I opened them, whoever was outside the tent would know I was awake. I do not know why I felt that. I felt it. The sound came again. It was a long, slow scraping. Something was dragging across the dirt outside my tent. Slow and steady, the kind of slow that takes patience. It paused. There was a long silence. Then the scrape came again. Closer this time. It was moving along the side of my tent at maybe a foot a second. My first thought was raccoon. We had not put the food in the cars. The cooler was still by the fire. A raccoon could smell food at half a mile, my father had said when I was 8. A raccoon was probably going through the trash right now. But a raccoon would have been at the cooler, not at my tent. There was no food in my tent, and a raccoon would not have made that sound. A raccoon scratches and chitters. This sound was a long pull. Something was pulling itself along the ground. My second thought was bear. Bears amble. Bears crash. This was not a crash, but bears can be quiet when they want to be. Bears are quieter than people give them credit for. The scrape paused again. The silence lasted longer this time. I could hear my own heart in my ears. I could hear my own breath, which I tried to slow and could not. Then I heard the breathing. It was not loud. It was on the other side of the canvas, no more than a foot from my head. It was a slow, even breath. In, out, in. Whatever was outside the tent was standing still and breathing. The breath had a faint catch in it, the way breath catches when there is something wrong with the throat, a rasp at the bottom of each exhale. I did not move. I could not have moved. I had the very specific thought, which I remember exactly, that if I moved, the canvas would shift and whatever was outside would know I had moved. Then it laughed. I have spent 11 years trying to describe that laugh, and I cannot. It was not a real laugh. It was not the laugh of a person who was amused. It was not even the laugh of a person who was pretending to be amused, the way someone laughs at a joke they did not get. It was the laugh of something that had heard a laugh described to it, but had never produced one. It was 3 syllables. The cadence was close to right. The pitch was close to right. The breath was close to right. And every part of it was off in a way that I could not have explained to anyone, because the offness was not in any one detail. The offness was in the whole. It laughed again, closer. The breath of it pushed against the canvas. I did not move. I did not breathe. I lay on my side in my sleeping bag with my eyes closed and my hands at my chest, and I waited. The laughter stopped. The scraping resumed. It moved away from my head, along the side of the tent, around to the back, away into the trees. I tracked the sound by feel. It was a slow, steady pull, a foot a second, fading into the woods on the downhill side of the meadow. Then it was gone. I lay there with my eyes closed for what felt like hours. I do not know how long it actually was. At some point I started to shiver. I could not stop. I was not cold. My body was shaking the way bodies shake when they have decided to shake without asking. I pulled the sleeping bag tight under my chin and I waited for daylight. I must have slept, because the next thing I knew, Tyler was patting my leg through the tent. "Hey, come look at this." I sat up fast enough that I almost cracked my head on the dome of the tent. I scrambled out of the sleeping bag and out the flap. The light outside was the soft gray of early morning. The fire was out. The meadow was still. The other 5 were standing around my tent in a loose half circle, all of them looking at the ground. Tyler put his hands on his hips. "Look at this," he said. I looked. The ground around my tent had been raked, not by tools, by something. There were long, deep grooves in the dirt, arcing around the front and side of the tent, leading off toward the tree line in a wandering trail. The grooves were about the width of a finger. They were paired in some places, 3 or 4 of them side by side, like the marks of a hand dragged through the dirt. My stomach dropped. My knees went loose. I had to put a hand on the tent pole to steady myself. "Holy shit," I said. I heard. Last night, I heard. Nate started laughing. He laughed loud. He laughed hard. He bent over with his hands on his knees. He pointed at me and laughed harder. Mike was already laughing. Jonah was laughing. Riley was laughing so hard he was crying. I stood there with my hand on the tent pole, and I felt the blood go from my face down into my chest and out into my hands. I went hot. I went cold. I did not understand for a long moment what was happening. Mike stepped out from behind my tent. He was holding a small garden trowel, the kind a kid uses in a sandbox, blue plastic handle. He held it up like a trophy. Nate laughed again. The same fake laugh. The same 3 syllables I had heard outside my tent in the dark. "I got you," Nate said. "Oh my God, I got you so good." I was angry first. I was angry for about 5 seconds. Then I was relieved. Then I was angry again. Then I started to laugh too, because there was nothing else to do. They had me. I had been had. I had been had so completely that I felt stupid for the last 7 hours of my life. The shaking, the breath I had been holding, the way my body had locked itself in place, all of it for nothing. All of it for Nate with a trowel and a bad impression of a laugh. "You son of a bitch," I said, which was the second time I had said it in 18 hours. "I love you," Nate said. "I love you so much." That was beautiful. Tyler was pretending to be apologetic, but he was laughing too. He put an arm around my shoulder. "I'm sorry. I really am. He came up with it last week and I said it was too mean. He said no, it would be perfect. You would love it. I do not love it. You'll love it eventually." "I will not love it eventually." "You will," Nate said. He was wiping his eyes. "5 years from now, you'll be telling this story at parties. The night I peed myself thinking a monster was outside my tent. I did not pee myself. I bet you peed yourself a little. I did not pee myself. Even a little bit. Honesty time. Eat my whole entire dick, Nate. Marcus laughed at that. Marcus laughed so hard that he had to sit down in the grass. It was a good prank. I have to admit that. Even now, 11 years on, I can admit that it was a good prank. It was the kind of prank you build a friendship's worth of references on. It was, for those first 5 minutes after I understood what had happened, the funniest thing any of us had ever done to each other. We laughed at the trowel. We laughed at Nate's impression of my face. We laughed at the way I had described what I had heard in the dark and how Nate had nodded along with a perfectly serious expression like I was telling him the worst story he had ever been told. We made breakfast. Jonah's percolator went on the fire. Mike scrambled eggs in a cast iron pan with bacon and onion and a handful of shredded cheese. Marcus ate his bakery bread with fig jam. Riley drank coffee with so much sugar in it that the spoon stood up by itself. Tyler made me a plate without asking what I wanted and handed it to me, which was how Tyler apologized. I sat at the fire with the plate in my lap and the coffee in my hand, and I told myself it was over. I told myself the whole night had been Nate and his trowel. I told myself the laugh I had heard had been Nate, even though Nate had been 20 feet away in his own tent, and the laugh had sounded like it was a foot from my head. I told myself the breathing had been the wind. I told myself a lot of things. I did not tell anybody about the shape on the ridge. I had been about to. I had opened my mouth twice during breakfast and closed it both times. Now there did not seem to be a point. The shape on the ridge had been an animal. Nate had said so. Nate was probably right. The whole weekend was going to be like this, jumping at shadows because of one bad prank. I told myself. The morning was warmer than the night had been. By 10, the sun was over the trees on the east side of the meadow, and the dew was burning off the grass. We sat around in our chairs and digested. Mike read a paperback he had brought, a James Patterson, with the cover half torn off. Jonah did the crossword in a folded newspaper from Wednesday. Marcus walked around the meadow with his Nikon. Tyler dozed in his chair with his hat pulled down. Nate threw a tennis ball against the side of his car and caught it as it bounced back, over and over, for almost an hour. Riley said he was going to take a walk. He walked along the cliff edge, away from the camp, slow, hands in his pockets. I sat in my chair and tried to read a book on my phone and could not. I kept losing the sentences. I would read a paragraph and realize I had not absorbed any of it. I would scroll back and try again, and the same thing would happen. After a while, I put the phone away and just sat. I watched the trees on the far side of the meadow. I watched the ridge across the valley. I watched the place where Riley was walking. I watched everything. I told myself I was relaxing. After a while, I noticed something. There were no birds. The day before, there had been jays in the meadow. There had been a woodpecker working a snag at the south end. There had been a kind of soft buzz of insects in the grass that you only notice when it stops. There had been chipmunks running along the duff at the edge of the trees. There had been the high, sharp call of something I could not identify from the canopy. Today there was nothing. The meadow was silent. The trees were silent. There was no buzz of insects, no birds, no chipmunks. There was only the sound of Nate's tennis ball hitting the side of his car, and Mike turning the pages of his paperback, and a wind moving through the firs that did not have any animal sound layered into it. I looked over at Jonah. Jonah was the kind of person who would have noticed. Jonah did not seem to be noticing. He was working the crossword. He had a small smile on his face like he had just figured out a clue. I told myself it was the time of day. Birds get quiet in the middle of the morning sometimes. I did not actually know if that was true. I told myself anyway. Mike found the shoe at noon. He had walked over to the firewood pile to bring back another armload for the fire ring, and he had stopped halfway and stood there for a long moment, and then he had bent down and picked something up. He came back to the fire with the firewood under one arm and the thing in his other hand. "Look at this," he said. It was a child's tennis shoe. It was small, the kind of size that fits a kid maybe 4 or 5 years old. It was canvas, with a faded picture of a dinosaur on the side. The laces were still tied. The toe was scuffed, and the canvas was dark with dirt and weather, but the shoe itself was intact. It was not falling apart. It had not been there for 10 years. It had not even been there for 1 year. We all looked at it. Mike turned it over in his hands. He held it out so we could see the sole. "Somebody lost a kid up here," Jonah said. "Or somebody lost their kid's shoe up here," Mike said. "Yeah, that." Nate took it. He looked at the laces. He looked at the inside of the shoe. "There's no kid up here," Nate said. "Could have been," Mike said. "Last summer. Year before. People camp up here. Family campers. How does a kid lose a shoe and not notice? They got 2 feet. Maybe they put it on the picnic table to dry and forgot it. There's no picnic table. Up at the camp by the trailhead there is. That's a mile from here." Mike took the shoe back. He looked at it for another moment. Then he tossed it into the fire. "Hey," Riley said. "What?" "That was a kid's shoe." It was a shoe. The kid is not coming back for it. It would have been in the fire eventually anyway. Saved us the trip to the trash. The rubber sole was already curling. The canvas blackened in seconds and then caught and went up in a quick low flame. A thin black smoke rose from it. The smell was acrid and chemical and wrong, the way burning plastic is always wrong. We watched it burn down to a small puddle of black sludge and a few twists of charred lace. Riley stood up and walked away. He went to the cliff edge and stood there with his back to us. "What's his deal?" Mike said. "He doesn't like waste," Jonah said. "He gets weird about it. It was a shoe. He gets weird." Nate watched the fire. He had not said anything since Mike had thrown the shoe in. He was watching the way the smoke went up. I watched him watch it. His face had gone still in a way I did not like. After a while he stood up. He stretched. He walked over to his car and got out the tennis ball and started throwing it against the side of the car again. The tennis ball made a hollow thump every time it hit. The thump echoed off the firs at the edge of the meadow and came back to us a half-second later. Around 2 p.m. I walked over to my tent to get a hat. The sun had come around and was hitting my chair directly, and I had been squinting for half an hour. When I bent down to crawl into the tent flap, I saw the marks. There were drag marks in the dirt around my tent. They were faint. They were not Nate's grooves from the night before. Nate's grooves had been raked clean by hand, deep and obvious, and Mike had pointed them out for me to see. These were different. They were small. They were thin. They were a series of fine parallel lines, 4 of them in a row, dragged through the dirt in long arcs around the perimeter of my tent. They led off toward the tree line on the downhill side, the same direction the sound had gone the night before. I stood up and looked at them for a long time. I told myself they could have been there since the night before. Nate could have made them by accident when he was setting up his prank. The dirt around the tent was disturbed in a lot of ways. It would be hard to say what had been made when. I told myself. I crawled into the tent and got my hat and crawled back out. I did not bend down to look at the marks again. I walked back to the fire with my hat on my head and I sat down in my chair and I did not say anything. Mike was telling a story about his kid. His kid was 3 years old. His kid had a stuffed dinosaur she carried everywhere. She had named the dinosaur Steve. Mike's kid woke up at 6 in the morning every day, no matter what time she went to bed. And Mike had been trying to fix this for 3 years and had failed. I let his voice wash over me. I did not look at the tree line. I did not look at my tent. I did not look at the cliff edge. It was around 3 when Marcus came back to the camp from his walk and asked if any of us had moved his camp chair. "No," Tyler said. "Why?" Mike said. "Because it's facing the trees now. I had it facing the fire. I left it facing the fire when I went for the walk. Now it's facing the trees." We all looked. Marcus's chair was on the side of the fire ring closest to the firs. It was not where he had been sitting all morning. It was turned around so that the seat was facing the dark of the tree line, not the open meadow and the cliff edge. Whoever had moved it had picked it up and set it down. The legs were even in the dirt. It had not been pushed or kicked. It had been carried. "Tyler," Marcus said, "did you move it?" "No." "Riley?" "No." "Mike?" "Jonah?" "Nate?" We all said no. Marcus looked at the chair. He looked at us. His face did the small, flat thing it did when he was bothered, which was something I had seen maybe 4 times in 13 years. Funny, he said. Wasn't me, Nate said. I'm done. I'm retired. The trowel was the last one. Wasn't me, Mike said. Nobody moved your chair, dude. Somebody moved my chair. He picked it up and turned it back around to face the fire. He sat down in it. He took his Nikon off and set it on the ground beside him. He did not say anything else. The conversation went on. Mike was on a new story now, about his uncle who had once tried to deep fry a turkey and had set his garage on fire. Jonah was laughing. Tyler was laughing. Riley had come back from the cliff edge and was eating a slice of Marcus's bread without permission, and Marcus was pretending not to notice. I was watching the tree line. About 30 feet inside the trees, where the firs got dense, the shadow looked wrong. I cannot say what I mean by wrong. It was a patch of shadow that was darker than the shadows around it. It was about the size and shape of a person, but it was lower than a person would be, like a person lying down. It was not moving, it was just there. The shadows around it shifted slightly when the wind moved the branches above them. The wrong patch did not shift. I stared at it for what must have been a minute. I did not say anything. I waited for it to move. It did not move. I told myself it was a stump. I told myself it was a fallen log. I told myself it was a trick of the light, the angle of the sun against the duff, my brain looking for patterns the way my brain always looked for patterns when I was tired and underslept. Then the wind shifted. It came from the trees toward us, and it brought a smell. The smell was wet pennies. The smell was a freezer that had been unplugged for a week. The smell was the inside of a barn that had not been opened all summer. It was thick, and it sat in the back of my throat, and I felt my stomach tighten against it. "Oh, God," Riley said. "Oh, God, what is that?" Mike turned his face away. "Possum. Got to be possum. Something died in there." "That is not a possum," Jonas said. "Bear kill," Mike said. "Bear ate something and dragged it back into the trees. There aren't bears up here. There are bears everywhere up here." The smell hung in the air for about a minute. Then the wind shifted again, and it was gone. We sat there in our chairs and breathed through our mouths until it cleared. I looked back at the tree line. The dark patch was gone. I did not say anything. I did not know how to say anything. The chair had been moved. The smell had come from where I had seen the dark patch. The dark patch was no longer there. I sat in my chair, and I held my hat in my hands, and I did not say anything because I did not know how to say it, and because Nate had already pranked me once, and because I did not want to be the guy who jumped at shadows for the rest of the weekend. Around 4, Tyler said he wanted to walk along the cliff to look for a place to take pictures. Marcus said he would go. The two of them walked off along the edge of the meadow with Marcus's Nikon over his shoulder. I watched them go. I stood up. "I'm going to walk to the cars," I said. Forgot something. I walked back toward the half circle of cars under the firs. The afternoon light was angled now, coming low through the trunks, the kind of light that makes everything look more solid than it is. I went to Tyler's hatchback first because I had left my jacket in the back seat the day before. The scratch on the driver's side caught my eye when I was reaching for the door handle. I stopped. I bent down. The scratch ran from the front fender almost all the way to the rear bumper. It was long and it was curving. It was not a straight line, the way a branch would have scraped if Tyler had brushed up against something on the drive-in. It was a long arcing curve, the kind of curve a finger would make if it dragged through paint at full extension. It was deep. It had cut down to the metal in 3 or 4 places. I stood back up. I looked at the other cars. Mike's truck had the same scratch. It ran along the passenger side. Same curve. Same length. Same depth. Jonah's Civic had it too, on the driver's side. Marcus's Subaru had it on the back hatch. I walked the half circle of cars in silence. Every single one of them had a long arcing scratch carved into the paint, some on the driver's side, some on the passenger, some on the hatch. The scratches were not from branches. The scratches were not from rocks. The scratches were all the same shape and all the same depth and all the same length, and there were 6 of them, one on each car under the firs. I walked back to the fire. "Hey," I said. "What?" Mike said. "Come look at the cars." "Why?" "Come look at the cars." He looked up from his book. He saw my face. He set the book down. He stood up. I led him back to the cars. I showed him his truck first. He bent down. He ran a finger along the scratch. He stood back up. He looked at me. "That's not from a branch," he said. "No, that's from—" He did not finish the sentence. We went around to the others. We looked at each one in turn. He stopped at Jonah's Civic for a long time. He stood up and put his hands on his hips. "All right," he said. "All right." He went back to the fire. He told the others. They got up. We all walked back to the cars together. We stood around in the dim light under the firs, and we looked at the scratches. Nobody said much. Nate was the first one to say anything. "This is real, right?" Nate said. "This is not me. This is not anybody. Nobody did this." "Nobody," Mike said. "Then what?" "I don't know. Branch. Animal. Something." "A branch did not do this. A branch does not match across 6 cars." "Then I don't know, Nate." We stood there for another minute. The light was getting low. Tyler and Marcus came back from their walk along the cliff and saw us standing around the cars and came over. We showed them. Tyler ran a hand along the scratch on his hatchback. He looked at Mike. Mike looked at Jonah. Jonah looked at me. "Did you guys hear about the bears in Detroit Lake last summer?" Mike said. "They were getting into cars. They were ripping doors off. Big black bears. They get desperate when the food is low." There was an article in the Salem paper. "This is not a bear," Jonah said. "It could be. Bears don't make matching scratches across 6 cars. Bears bite. Bears rip. They don't draw a line. Maybe it was a bear with claws." "Mike," Jonah said, "listen to yourself." Mike was quiet for a second. Then he said, "Yeah, okay. So what?" Nobody said what. We walked back to the fire. The fire had burned down to coals. Jonah built it back up. Mike said he was going to start dinner. He pulled out the ground beef and started forming patties. We sat in our chairs in a tighter circle than we had been in that morning. Nobody said anything for a while. Marcus took photos of the trees as the light went down. Riley drank a beer, faster than I had ever seen Riley drink a beer. The sun went behind the western ridge. At about 8:15, the temperature started to drop. The meadow went into shadow. The fire became the brightest thing in our world. We ate the burgers. They were good. Mike was a good cook. He had been a good cook since high school, when he had worked at a diner in town as a busboy and had spent his shifts watching the line cooks and asking questions. We ate in our chairs with the plates in our laps. Nobody talked much. Around 9, Riley stood up. "I gotta pee," he said. "Then go pee," Mike said. "Where?" "Anywhere." "In the trees." "In the trees, Riley." "Yes, in the trees." Riley looked at the trees. He looked at the cliff edge. "I'll go by the cliff," he said. "Fine. Don't fall off." "I am not going to fall off." He walked away from the fire toward the cliff edge. The cliff edge was about 30 feet away. The light from the fire reached maybe 15 feet. After that, he was in the dark. We watched his silhouette walk to the edge and then turn to the side, walking along the rim of the cliff to find a spot in the brush. He went about 10 feet past the edge of our firelight. We could not see him anymore, but we could hear him moving through the brush. We kept eating. The scream came at 9:16 p.m. I know because I looked at my phone immediately after, the way you do when something cuts the world in half and you want to mark the moment. It was a short scream. It was not the long scream of someone falling. It was the short, sharp scream of someone seeing something. It cut off almost as soon as it started. We were already on our feet. "Riley," Tyler said. "Riley." Riley came crashing back through the brush. He was running. He was running the wrong way, away from the cliff, toward the fire, fast and uneven. He stumbled into the firelight with his hands held up in front of him, like he was trying to push something away from his face. His eyes were wide. His mouth was open. He could not get a sound out at first. He tried. "Riley," Tyler said. He grabbed Riley by the shoulders. "Riley, look at me." Riley looked at him. "Off the edge," Riley said. "There's. Off the edge." "What?" "Off the edge. Off the edge. Off the edge." "Riley." "Words. I saw." "Saw what?" Riley shook. He shook the way I had shaken the night before in my tent, the whole body unable to stop. He grabbed Tyler's flannel collar with both hands. He pulled Tyler in close. "There is something hanging off the cliff," he said. "There is something. Holding on to the edge." Mike started to laugh. Mike laughed. It was a short, loud laugh. It was the laugh of a person who has been wound tight all day and has finally been given an excuse to release. "Riley, come on, man. I'm not. Get out of here. After the trowel? Come on. You almost had me. I'm not. You're getting me back for the chair. For Marcus's chair. I knew it was you. It was not me. Riley, come on, look at me. I will laugh. You did good. Tell me you got me." "I did not." Riley let go of Tyler's collar. He turned to Mike. He grabbed Mike by the shirt the same way he had grabbed Tyler. "I am not joking," he said. He was crying. There were tears running down his face into his beard, and Riley did not have a beard. He had stubble, and the tears were running through it and dripping off his chin onto Mike's flannel. "I am not joking. I swear to God, I am not joking. There is something out there." Mike stopped laughing. I had been watching them. I had not been watching anything else. The light from the fire was on the four of them in the middle of the half circle of chairs. Mike and Tyler and Riley in the center. Nate to the left. Jonah and Marcus behind. Me at the back near my tent. I turned my head. There was a face at the edge of the firelight. It was on the ground. It was at the very edge of where the firelight reached, on the side of the camp opposite the cliff where the meadow met the trees. It was at ground level, the way a face would be if a person had laid down flat on their stomach and pushed their head into the light. It was pale. The eyes were open. The mouth was closed. The face was looking at us. I could not move. I could not speak. I had the very specific thought, which I remember exactly, that if I moved or spoke, the face would do something, and I did not know what the something was, but I knew with a clarity I had not earned that the something would be bad. The clarity was the same clarity I had felt at the cliff edge the day before, looking at the shape on the opposite ridge. The certainty that came from nowhere. The cold down the back of the neck. I made a sound. It was not a word. It was a sound, soft, almost a hum. Marcus turned first. He saw it. He made a sound too. It was the same kind of sound. Then the others turned. Mike said, "Oh," that was all he said. We stood in the firelight, and we looked at the face. The face looked back. The face did not move. Nothing moved. The fire crackled. Somewhere far down in the valley, something called out, and I did not know what. Then a hand came into the light. The hand was long. The fingers were thin. The fingers came to fine points at the ends, the way the fingers of a tree branch come to points. The hand pressed into the dirt at the edge of the light, and the arm that came out of the dirt behind it was long, longer than an arm should be, twice the length from elbow to wrist as my own arm. The skin was pale. The skin had a sheen to it, not wet, not dry, something else. The joints of the arm were not where joints should be. There was an extra joint in the middle of what would have been the forearm, and it bent the wrong way. The hand pulled. The body behind the hand came forward into the light, slow, smooth, no sound at all. It was on its belly. It was crawling. The shoulders came into the light, hunched up around the head, and the head was small and bald, and the face was the same face from before, and now I could see the eyes, and the eyes were open and wet, and the wrong color, and the mouth opened a little, just a little, and I saw teeth. It pulled itself forward. Another foot. The other arm came into the light. the thin ribs of a long, thin torso. The hips were narrow. The legs were behind it somewhere, still in the dark. It did not stand. It crawled low to the ground, the way a lizard would crawl, but smoother, with a kind of liquid grace that no animal I have ever seen has had. It stopped at the edge of the firelight, 10 feet from where I was standing. It looked at us. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then it laughed. The same 3 syllables. The same wrong cadence. The same puff of breath through teeth. I felt my legs lock under me. I felt the back of my neck go cold. I felt my bladder give a sharp warning kick, and I clamped down on it and held. It laughed again. It cocked its head to the side, slow, the way a person cocks their head when they are trying to understand something. That was when Marcus turned and ran. I do not blame him for it. I have thought about it for 11 years, and I do not blame him for it. Marcus had been quiet all his life, and quiet people sometimes break the wrong way when they break. He turned, and he ran, but he did not run toward the cars. He ran toward the trees. He ran past my tent toward the tree line on the downhill side, the same direction the sound had gone the night before, the same direction the dark patch had been in the afternoon. The thing in the firelight moved. I did not see it move. I saw the dark space where it had been, and I saw a smear of pale against the dark, and then it was gone. There was no sound. There was no scrape of dirt. There was no rush of air. It was at the edge of the firelight, and then it was not. The space where it had been was empty. Marcus screamed from inside the trees. The scream was short. The scream cut off. It cut off into a sound like a wet sheet being torn. The sound was the kind of sound you hear once in your life, and then you spend the rest of your life trying not to hear it again. I have heard it again. Sometimes, in the night, when I am not careful with my own thoughts, I hear it. Marcus, Tyler said. Tyler ran toward the trees. I do not know what he was thinking. I do not think he was thinking. He was already 3 steps in when Mike grabbed him by the collar and yanked him backward. No, Marcus. No, Tyler. No. Marcus came back out of the trees. He came out at a stumbling lurch, one hand on his thigh, the other reaching out for support. He came into the firelight and he fell to his knees. He was holding his right thigh. Blood was coming through his fingers. It was coming through his fingers in a steady dark flow, not a spurt, but a flow, and his jeans were dark to the knee already. He looked at us. He could not speak. We moved. I do not remember the order of what happened next. I remember Tyler getting one of Marcus's arms over his shoulder. I remember Jonah getting the other. I remember Mike screaming, "Truck! Truck! Truck!" and digging in his pocket for his keys. I remember Riley collapsing onto his knees and being yanked back up by Nate. I remember the fire still burning. I remember not looking at the tree line, not once. Not for any reason, not even when I heard the sound from inside it that was not a sound an animal makes. We got to the cars. Tyler and Jonah loaded Marcus into the bed of Mike's truck. They climbed in with him. Mike got into the driver's seat. Nate dragged Riley to Riley's car and pushed him into the passenger side and got behind the wheel. I went with Tyler to the hatchback, but Tyler was in the bed of Mike's truck holding Marcus, so I got behind the wheel of the hatchback myself. The keys were in the cup holder. Tyler had left them there because he had not thought he would need to lock the car. We drove down the mountain in a convoy of 3. Mike's truck in front, Riley's car behind it with Nate at the wheel, me at the back in Tyler's hatchback, alone. I do not remember the drive. I remember that the hatchback bottomed out twice on the gravel coming down, and I did not slow for either one of them. I remember that the gravel turned to pavement at the bottom of Forest Road 26 and that I gripped the wheel so hard I could not feel my hands. I remember that I did not look in the rear view mirror once because I knew if I looked, I would see the meadow behind me and the fire behind me and something in the trees on the downhill side. And if I saw it, I would not be able to drive. And if I could not drive, I would die on Forest Road 26. We took Highway 26 east into Madras. The hospital in Madras was the closest one. It was 40 miles. It took us 34 minutes. I do not know how Mike's truck made the drive. I do not know how Marcus did not bleed out in the back of the bed. He had Tyler's flannel and Jonah's hoodie wrapped around his leg by the time we got there, and the flannel and the hoodie were both soaked through, and Marcus was the color of paper. We carried him into the emergency room together. Mike was yelling for a doctor. The woman at the desk got up so fast she knocked her chair backward. Within 30 seconds, there were 3 people in scrubs around Marcus, and they were taking him from us, and he was on a gurney, and they were rolling him down a hallway, and we were standing in the waiting room with our hands sticky and the smell of Marcus's blood in our nostrils. A nurse made us sit. She brought a clipboard. She asked Tyler what had happened. Tyler looked at me. I looked at Mike. Mike looked back at us. Tyler started to talk. He told her that we had been camping at Crawford Ridge. He told her that Marcus had walked too close to the cliff edge and had slipped. He told her that Marcus had caught his leg on a jagged piece of rock on the way down. He told her that the 4 of us had pulled him back up. He told her that we had driven straight to the hospital. The nurse wrote it all down. She did not look up from the clipboard while Tyler talked. When he was done, she took the clipboard back to the desk and gave it to the woman behind the counter. We sat. We waited. We did not speak. We did not look at each other. Mike's eyes were closed. Jonah was holding his glasses in his hands and turning them over and over. Tyler was staring at a spot on the floor a foot in front of his shoes. Riley had stopped crying, which was somehow worse than the crying had been. Nate sat next to him with one hand on Riley's shoulder. I sat next to Tyler. My hands were still sticky. There was blood under my fingernails. I had blood on my jeans. I had blood on the underside of my left forearm where I had pressed it against Marcus's leg in the truck bed before I had moved to the hatchback. I had blood on my collar. I did not remember how it had gotten on my collar. It was 3:40 a.m. when the doctor came out. She was in her 50s. She had short gray hair and tired eyes. She had a clipboard. She walked up to us, and she looked at each of us in turn, and she said, "Whose friend is Marcus?" "All of us," Tyler said. "All right. He is going to be all right. The leg is bad, but it is not as bad as it looks. He lost a fair amount of blood, but he is stable. We have him on fluids. He needs surgery to repair the muscle. He is going to be here for several days." We breathed. Mike put his face in his hands. Riley started crying again. "I want to ask you some questions," the doctor said. We waited. The cuts on his leg are not consistent with a fall. They are not consistent with rocks. They are clean cuts. 3 of them, parallel. Each one is roughly 6 inches long. The depth is even along the length of each cut. They are surgical almost. They look like they were made with a blade, or with 3 blades side by side. Tyler said, "He slipped on the rocks. We pulled him back up." The doctor looked at him. She did not say anything for a long moment. "All right," she said. She turned to leave. She turned back. "My name is Dr. Allen," she said. "If anything comes back to you, if any of you remember anything that did not happen the way you said it happened, you can ask for me any time. I am here Monday through Friday, and I work the overnight on weekends through the rest of the summer. You can ask for me." She held Tyler's eyes for a long second. Then she walked away. We sat in the waiting room until the sun came up. Marcus was in the hospital for 5 days. We visited him every day. He did not speak much. He answered direct questions with one-word answers. He did not look at any of us in the face. The first time I went in to see him, the second day, he was sitting up in bed with a leg bandaged and elevated and the IV drip in his arm. He looked at me when I walked in. He looked at the floor. When I sat down, he did not look back up the whole time I was there. I stayed for 40 minutes. I brought him a paperback from the gas station bookstore down the street, a Michael Connelly that he had once said he liked. He took it from me and set it on the bedside table without looking at it. I said, "Marcus, I am sorry." He did not say anything. "I am sorry. I do not know why I am sorry. I just am." He did not say anything. I sat with him until visiting hours were over. I drove back to the hotel where the rest of us had taken 2 rooms. I did not tell Tyler about the visit. I did not tell anyone. On the 5th day, Marcus's mother drove up from Eugene to take him home. We were all there to see him go. He let his mother hug each of us in turn. He himself stood by the car with his crutches under his arms and looked at the asphalt. When the time came for him to get into the passenger seat, he looked up. He looked at Tyler first. He looked at Mike. He looked at Jonah. He looked at Riley. He looked at Nate. He looked at me last. He said, "I am not going to call any of you. Please do not call me." He got in the car. His mother drove him away. That was the last time I saw Marcus. Tyler left for Boise on Saturday morning. We helped him pack the hatchback the night before. He did not have much. 2 suitcases, 3 boxes of books, a duffel of bedding, a coffee maker, a guitar he never played. He did not say much during the loading. None of us did. When everything was in the car, he stood with his hand on the driver's side door, and he looked at the rest of us in the gravel driveway of his mother's house, and he said, "I'll call when I get in." He did. He called the next night at 10. He told me about the drive. He told me about the apartment. He told me about a brewery he had passed on the way in that he was going to take me to when I came out to visit. He sounded like himself, mostly. There was a small thing in his voice that had not been there before, but I did not point it out because he was working hard to keep it from being there at all. I told him I would come visit. We hung up. The others scattered. Mike stayed in Bend with his wife and his daughter. He went back to the body shop. He stopped returning texts after about a month. The last text I sent him was in October, asking how his daughter was doing. He did not respond. I did not send another one. Jonah went to Portland. He had been offered a job at a tech company in the Pearl District 3 weeks before the trip, and he took it the week after. He sent me a Christmas card the first year. He did not send one the second year. We were Facebook friends until 2017, when one of us removed the other. I do not remember which of us did it. Riley enlisted. He went to Marine boot camp in October and was at Quantico by February. He sent me a postcard from Virginia in March that said, "Holy shit," and nothing else. I do not know what he meant. I do not know if he meant anything. I never heard from him again. Nate stayed in town for almost 2 years. He texted me sometimes. We would trade a few messages and then it would go quiet again. We would not talk about the camping trip. Then he moved to Portland too, and after that I lost track of him. The last time I heard from him was an email in 2017. He said he had not been sleeping. He said he was going somewhere quiet for a while. He did not say where. He did not say more. I did not respond. I stayed in town for 2 weeks after Tyler left. I could not sleep. I would lie in my bed in the apartment I shared with 3 college roommates, and I would close my eyes, and I would hear the laugh. I would hear it through the wall. I would hear it in the hallway. I would hear it in the kitchen when my roommate Dan was making toast. I would hear it in the bathroom faucet. I would hear it in the heater. I knew it was none of those things. I knew it was the building settling and the heater clicking and Dan being awake at 3 in the morning, the way Dan was awake at 3 in the morning every night. I knew. I still could not sleep. I called Tyler on the 15th night. It was 3 a.m. in Salem and 4 a.m. in Boise. He answered on the second ring. "Yeah, it's me. Yeah, Tyler. Is your spare room? Is it still empty? Yeah. Can I come?" I drove out the next morning. I left a note for my roommates, and I packed my car, and I drove 440 miles east through the night, and I got to Tyler's apartment in Boise at 9 that evening. He had a key under the doormat. He was working late. I let myself in. I put my suitcases in the spare room. I lay down on the bed without taking off my shoes. I slept for 14 hours. I have been in Boise for 11 years. I got a job at a coffee roastery 6 weeks after I arrived. I started in the warehouse, sorting bags by origin and date. I moved up to the roasting floor a year later. I am the head roaster now. I run a team of 4. I make decent money. I have an apartment of my own about 2 miles from Tyler's, which is no longer Tyler's because Tyler got married to a woman named Beth 4 years ago, and they bought a house in the foothills. I am at their house every Thursday for dinner. Beth makes a kind of green chili stew that is one of the better things I've eaten. Their daughter is 2. She calls me uncle. She does not say it correctly. She says it like Kel with a hard K. I let her ride on my shoulders when I am over. I sleep with the blinds closed. I sleep with a small lamp on by the bed. I have been doing this for 11 years, and I have stopped pretending that I will stop. The lamp has been replaced twice. The current one is from a store in downtown Boise that sells the kind of tasteful mid-century furniture that I cannot really afford. I bought the lamp anyway because the one before it had a switch that clicked too loud and the click was making me jump in the night, and a switch that clicks too loud is the kind of thing I now spend money to fix. I never went back to Oregon. I have not been past Ontario at the border in 11 years. My mother visits me every November. She is patient with me about this. She does not ask why. I will not come west of the river. Marcus moved to Olympia with his mother 3 months after the trip, and I have not heard his voice since. I tried to find him on Facebook in 2019. There were 2 Marcus Coopers in Olympia, and neither of them was him. I stopped trying. Tyler and I do not talk about the trip. We did once, in 2022, when we had both had too much to drink at his bachelor party, and we ended up on the back deck of the bar at 1 in the morning. He started crying. He said he was sorry he had brought me. He said he had been thinking about it every day for 7 years. He said he wished he had let me say no. I told him I would have said yes anyway. I told him I would have said yes because he had asked, and because I would have said yes to anything he asked. We sat on the back deck and we cried together for about 10 minutes, and then we went back inside. We have not talked about it since. For years, I had thought I was done with it. The lamp by the bed was enough. I had stopped expecting it to come back. About 6 months ago, I moved into a new apartment. It is on the 2nd floor of a building in the North End. It has a small kitchen and a small bedroom and a small living room and a laundry room off the kitchen, which is a feature I had not had in any previous apartment and which I had wanted for years. I did my laundry on a Sunday night in October. I have always done laundry on Sunday nights. Tyler was at his daughter's birthday party in the foothills. I had not gone. I had a cold. I had been on the couch all day with a book and a box of tissues. The dryer was running. I was on the couch. The book was a Cormac McCarthy I had been working through for a month. The cold was a bad one. The clock on the kitchen wall said 10:40 p.m. I heard a sound from the laundry room. It was not the dryer. I know the dryer. The dryer has a clunk when the sneaker comes around. The dryer has a high whine when the load gets unbalanced. The dryer has a click when the timer trips. This was not the dryer. It was a puff of breath through teeth. I sat on the couch with the book in my lap. I did not move. I did not look toward the laundry room. The puff came again. It came a 3rd time. The 3rd time it had a cadence, 3 syllables. The pitch was close to right. The breath was close to right. Every part of it was off in a way that I could not have explained to anyone, because the offness was not in any one detail. The offness was in the whole. I sat on the couch with the book in my lap, and I stared straight ahead at the wall, and I did not move for what must have been an hour. The dryer ran out. The buzzer went off. The laundry room went quiet. I have not been in the laundry room since. The clothes are still in there, the whole load. They have been in there since October. The door is closed. I bought a new set of clothes a week after that night. They are folded on top of my dresser in the bedroom. I do my laundry at a laundromat now, 12 blocks east, the one on the corner that is open until midnight. I go on Sunday nights. I sit in the plastic chair and I watch my clothes turn in the front loader, and I drink a bad coffee from the machine, and I do not look at the wall behind the dryers. Tyler has noticed that I no longer use the laundry room. He has not asked. He is a good friend that way. I am not going to ask him to come over and open the door. I am not going to ask anyone to come over and open the door. The door is going to stay closed. The clothes are going to stay in the dryer. The dryer is going to stay quiet. I have decided this. I have decided it in the same way I decided to buy the new lamp. Sometimes in the night, I lie in bed with the lamp on and I think about Marcus. I think about his face the day his mother took him home. I think about him standing by the car with his crutches under his arms and his eyes on the asphalt and the way he had looked at the six of us before he got in. I think about how he had looked at me last. I think he had wanted to say something. I think he had wanted to tell me to be careful. I think about Crawford Ridge. Sometimes, too, I think about the meadow. I think about the cliff edge. I think about the opposite ridge across the valley and the long bone of stone with the firs growing out of it at angles that should not have been possible. I think about the shape on the ridge that first afternoon, the way it had stopped when I had squinted at it, the way I had known, without earning the knowledge, that it was looking back at me. I think about that a lot. I do not go in the laundry room. I do not know if it followed Marcus too. I do not know if it followed any of the others. I do not know if it was always going to follow whichever of us put our tent at the edge of the meadow, with the dark of the firs at our back, 20 feet from the others, alone. I have wondered about that for 11 years. I have wondered if I am the reason it came. I have wondered if it chose me first and saved Marcus, for second only because he ran toward it. I have wondered a lot of things in 11 years. I do not have answers for any of it. I only have the lamp by my bed, and the laundromat 12 blocks east, and the door to the laundry room that I do not open. And sometimes, late, when the apartment is very quiet, and the heater has stopped clicking, and the neighbors have all gone to sleep, I lie in the dark with the lamp on, and I listen. And sometimes I hear it, a puff of breath through teeth, on the other side of the wall. 3 syllables, close to right. Not quite,